I am just so stoked for this interview because today on Super Progressive, we're joined by Danny Tenaglia.
Super progressive. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing, man? How's your trip out in California been?
It's been amazing. I got to say, I played Vegas on Friday, San Diego Saturday, which was really good, San Diego, but it's always nice when you have the best for last. You know, no disrespect to the other gigs, but this was by far, you know, a larger venue, a host of DJs, just an all-around, like a, you know, mini one-day festival kind of thing. So I really appreciated the energy from the audience, and I fed off of it, and my adrenaline is still on 10, you know.
Definitely. And you were saying a little bit before the interview that when it's a techno show, you kind of get into it a little bit more quicker, or you get to bring a little bit more heavy tunes to the table.
Right, because it's not a typical journey where I'm starting the night and I'm, you know, waiting for people to fully, excuse me, get into the room. And, you know, when everything settles, coat check, whatever it might be, when they're all finally in that spot on the dance floor, and that I could, you know, just take it to the next phase with the punch and the levels, and sort of like, you know, what you would consider peak time tracks. So when you have to play 2, maybe 3 hour sets, and I'm a journey kind of guy that loves to tell a story, because that's how it always was when I started this career back in the day. You're the DJ, and you have your opening songs, usually not so fast, down tempo. You gradually pick it up until the room is full, and then you're full on. Then you have your going home, down tempo, kind of like more something maybe vocally to have them remember the night by, and just sing, wake up the next day singing. So this is just, and I love techno, but I don't get to play techno sets very often.
Got it. So Jack's behind the camera. We spend so much time reading about house music history.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest things that we've learned throughout all of house music history is that at your Be Yourself residency at Vinyl, you would actually take the microphone and welcome the clubbers to the dance floor and speak to them sometimes.
Well, I'm kind of like a host. I was the host at Be Yourself Fridays at Vinyl, and which lasted 5 years and 3 months, every Friday, and it was midnight till noon. So if I didn't have an opening DJ, I'd play the whole night, 12 hours, and I loved it. But I often had guest DJs open till maybe 2 a.m., and you know, you get in the booth, people see you kind of thing, and like, hey, Danny. So I get on the mic, say, hey, welcome to Vinyl, and Be Yourself at Vinyl, and please give it up for, you know, Deep Dish, Beiruz, Demi, whoever my guest DJ may have been, you know, as many people over the years. And so that's pretty much how it was. Or I'd mention who might be coming next week, because, you know, it is all part of the, you know, entertainment game. You know, it's like there's not shows, which I, you know, was accustomed to in the early days of working nightclubs. There was just, you know, stop the music, there'd be a performance by maybe a famous band or something, and then the DJ goes back on. But that's long ago. So I pretty much felt comfortable to be that person, that host, artist, whatever.
Jack and I got to see you for the first time at Reform Festival, and everyone's talking about the magic of Danny Tenaglia and the magic of these sets, but we never really fully understood what they meant. But then when we see you in your power position, and you know your music so well, you're DJing, you're like this, you know an awesome lyric's about to come up, and you just on the stage wail the lyric, and it's like, It's like a exorcism of energy from you through the mixer, through the speaker to the dance floor. Like, how do you prepare yourself for these moments? How do you create these moments in your set?
You know what? Let me just first say that what you're saying, and I appreciate it, made me think of when I'm often asked the question about my mentor, although I have many, but the number one mentor for many DJs from New York is Larry Levan at the Paradise Garage. So if people tell me what was it about Larry that, what was the magic, whatever the question might be, and I would say, from him I learned to make the people feel what I'm feeling. So he was in a mezzanine. He wasn't as, pardon me, I have this tickle, as animated. There wasn't like, people were on the dance floor doing their thing. People weren't staring at the DJ back then at all. Now you feel almost pressured to be somewhat of a character, and I don't have a problem with that because I'm a little Italian boy from Brooklyn. Napolitan. And so with that, with my love and passion for the music and learning it and knowing it, studying it, the breaks, the changes, it's like I don't try to take ownership for the song, but I do feel a sense of performing it, even if there's no lyrics.
Right.
Like just accent that break,
Or the 1, 2, 3, 4 counting I saw you do. That was awesome.
1, 2, 3, 4.
No, yeah. And you brought up Larry Levan and the Paradise Garage, and I'm gonna have some questions about that at the end of the interview. But I want to bring it back to 1992. I want to bring it back to your mix of Surrender Yourself with the Dow, because you were on a Chris Liebing podcast, and you mentioned that this track holds a really special place in your heart. So why is this one of your favorite tracks, and how did it kind of foreshadow the music that would be coming from Tribal Records around 1994?
Right. Well, Peter and Vanessa Dow became really good friends of mine. Peter Dow was a brilliant piano player, and his wife Vanessa did the vocals. And that record actually was released on Columbia Records, Sony. And the original product, their album version, was kind of like a alternative, rockish with jazz influence when he plays the piano. And they allowed me to basically transform it into a 13-minute dance record. So she re-sang the poetry and the background vocals. So it was basically like a production of mine, and they gave me full reign to do what I want, like the mix down and the editing, the arrangement, and I brought it into like a somewhat of a disco appeal by putting in a soul kind of loop and stabs from Love Is the Message, and it was just a whole journey within itself. And then I went on to do, over the years, 3 other songs with them, and all 4 songs I did with them were number 1 in Billboard. So it got us a lot of attention. I mean, they weren't like sales charts, but they were club dance hits, and one of them was even at number 1 for 3 weeks. And that's really hard to do, even for like super popular artists. So throughout the 90s, I had a big remix career, and Peter was often my programmer, piano player, keyboards. So it just was like the start of something that got me recognized internationally. People were buying records back then, and DJs were getting promos. And that led to the following year of me making my own record, which was bottom heavy. which came out on Tribal and Heart and Soul album, which was originally a remix of mine for New Order that they rejected. So I took away all their vocals, got permission. They were cool with it. And I just put in the vocal, well, you just look over your shoulder, 'cause, you know. And that was the one that really elevated things to me getting phone calls to play from London to Tokyo and Italy. And 45 countries later, I'm sitting here in LA for maybe the 8th time playing here, maybe. So I've traveled the world extensively stemming from that.
I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit, but because there's so many different eras of New York clubbing. And I think that might be because an era of clubbing kind of comes down to the clubs that are open. And sometimes clubs are only open for 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years. But one era of clubbing and 2 specific clubs that our viewers consistently refer to are Twilo and Tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Can you and a lot of our viewers are big fans of like the progressive house era.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain some defining characteristics of Twilo and Tunnel, and then why those 2 clubs have kind of achieved this legendary status all these years later, despite, Twilo, I think, was open from 1996 to 2000 or 2001.
Yeah. Oh, it was a little past that, I think.
Or a little past that, sorry.
I gotta collect myself here. Okay. There's a lot of similarities, like Twilo and Tunnel were both on 27th Street on the west side. And Tunnel came first, and it was originally a train station, so it still had like the beams that you'd see in a New York train station. And it was very, very long and narrow, which named it the Tunnel, but it had different rooms and probably could... I remember nights I played there where there was well over 4,000 people there, same as Twilo, but I think, average was 3 and above. And Tunnel had a history prior to Twilo of being something that was almost like rave culture, like it welcomed different types of DJs in the main room, different nights. It could be hip hop, it could be, rave and multiple DJs. They had a DJ set up in the gender neutral bathroom, which is a thing here and there around the world now, even in Ibiza. And so it had a host of, I remember people like Timmy Regisford played there, so it had its deep, soulful roots. And it just evolved. And then the same owner was the owner of the Limelight, so it also had that club kid appeal. Same promoters, Michael A-League, all those guys. So it had that colorful side, a mixture of gays, and everything was there. Twilo was originally the Sound Factory, the original Sound Factory, and I believe that opened around 86, 87. I believe those are the years. And the Sound Factory was modeled after the Paradise Garage. So honestly, I could talk for days about this because there's so much history. Because in order to talk about the Sound Factory, I'd have to describe the garage.
We can go into the garage right now if you'd like.
Okay, well, we could go into the concept of how Sound Factory and Twilo compared to the garage.
That's perfect.
Then we could talk about Larry and all that, all the emotional stuff later. You might need a tissue. All right, so the Paradise Garage was a unique club because it had no liquor. That's number one. It had a very strict policy. They were only open Saturdays. They would open the doors at 1 a.m. and go to about 11 a.m. on average. The The ceilings were glass, so once daylight came in, it brought the daylight into the room, which is unique. That didn't happen at Twilo. At Sound Factory, they did have like initially like a similar concept, but they eventually closed it up. So people wouldn't leave, I guess, just keep them there in the dark. And so when the Paradise Garage closed in 1987, there's a guy that was the owner of Sound Factory, one of the partners, Phil Smith. He was very involved in nightclubs and sound systems as well. He partnered with Steve Dash, who became the Phazon Club Sound Systems, which was what was at Twilo and Sound Factory. So Phil's concept was to make a nightclub like the Paradise Garage. No liquor, just be an after hours, legitimate dance party space that, you know, wouldn't be full of a mess of drunks. And I mean, I guess this is even before the whole VIP mentality, but none of that would be there, like tables or service. And it was just pure, hardcore, underground, after hour mentality. And mind you, it wouldn't be right if I didn't mention that Paradise Garage initially was predominantly a gay black club for many years. Had its mixture, especially with industry personnel like myself and Judy Weinstein and Bobby Shaw, people that worked at record labels. You know, a lot of us would visit, but predominantly it was a black gay club. And that's where it, when I do talk about the garage and the music, I can refer that to being like a gospel-y, churchy, kind of like, oh my God, where are we? Because the participation was unbelievable, from the crowd performances and to what Larry was playing. Sound Factory was later, so it was a different mentality, but still, it's a New York thing, and people did clap and stomp, don't get me wrong, but it didn't have the drama like Garage, because Larry would often stop the music. Like, he didn't really mix a lot. He used to, but then he got less and less, and would just let one record end and start the next one. And people didn't care. They just stomped, applauded. As soon as the next song started, it was usually something we all loved, and you'd get that initial like, oh, he's playing this kind of. So there's differences, but Sound Factory was modeled after the Garage, I guess, in sound, the 4-point system that I'm talking about, where you're surrounded by stacks, which is almost unheard of these days now, where a lot of the shows and the clubs are just putting sound along the stages of the DJ booths facing out at the crowd in a concert sort of mentality, the way the festivals are as well. It's almost a whole nother topic to talk about that mentality of how they're putting up sound systems today, like we have the speakers flown from above and bass below, which gives the viewers and the people in the VIP rooms room to look around or be noticed.
Right.
So if you have stacks there, it blocks a lot of the view. So you're not getting that same quality sound, although sound has developed greatly with some of these, amazing companies. But I'm still more for the 4-point system.
Right.
So you're only getting half the punch. I want you to feel it like quadraphonic. So I don't know. Talking about Sound Factory, after the Garage closed, Phil Smith and his partners developed an after-hour club with no liquor, only open Saturdays, and it was predominantly gay as well in the Chelsea area of Manhattan. But eventually, they, just like the Garage, they started opening Fridays and started getting more of a mixture, but still held a strict policy at the door, membership and things like that, and being careful of who they let in. And the Tunnel, just kept doing its own thing. When the Sound Factory closed and reopened as Twilo, there was, I think, about a year before it reopened. And that's when they welcomed different DJs and it was how can I put this? I guess it was the era we're talking about of like the early years of Global Underground, and now trance music obviously has made a big name for itself around the world. Paul Van Dyke, Armin van Buuren, Paul Oakenfold, etc. And that sound was starting to make its way into New York. And then probably with Sasha and Digweed, they made a big, huge impact as well. And they started playing at Twilo on Fridays, along with all the other big names as well as guests. I was the resident on Saturday, but then I also would now play on Fridays, not every single week. I was resident on Saturday, but sometimes like every other week. And we would have all different kinds of guest DJs, whether progressive or I remember suggesting Daft Punk, and we had them, like they opened for me at Twilo, like Basement Jacks, who amazing people. DJ Pierre, a lot of Doc Martin, amazing guy, and Derek Carter. So all different kinds of DJs that were elevating upon the scene. Tony DeVitt and Trade. They did a trade event at Twilo a couple of times. Oh, wow. So I got to play with a lot of these amazing DJs, and this was all around the era of 96, 97 then, because that's when I did the Global Underground series, so I started becoming known on that platform as well. But I don't know, you might want to interject with a question, because I'm, like I said, I could talk about this for like a month.
Well, we can kind of take it two different directions.
Yeah.
I want to take it, before we get into the Be Yourself at Vinyl and Global Underground, I have a specific question for you about the Paradise Garage.
Okay.
That I'm really interested in. So around the world, there are dedicated house music fans that know the Paradise Garage as one of the initial homes of dance music, of house music, of this culture. The same thing goes for the Warehouse in Chicago. And these are two clubs that has international adoration from the house music community.
Right.
How come, well, let's just say this, the Warehouse is currently a lawyer's office, and there's no museum commemorating the Warehouse, to the best of my knowledge, or the Paradise Garage, to the best of my knowledge. How can New York City, Chicago, and just these cities and communities in general, how can we do more to celebrate the history of house music in its home?
The roots of house music has evolved into so many different genres that some people wouldn't even know, how to dissect it, especially if they didn't live it. They're not from the 70s and 80s and saw the changes that, it went from being very deep house to us DJs from back in the day. Deep house was more emotional and something that, give you goosebumps with the chord changes, progression, the vocals, the lyrics, content. Today, people might consider deep house something that's a lot of instrumentals and mainly electronic music. So it's a loaded question, but what I can tell you about Paradise Garage and Warehouse, which I've never been to, but because I'm so familiar with the history of house and living the Paradise Garage for a good several years. I mean, my membership started in 1980. Larry and Frankie Knuckles were in New York in the early days, friends. And I think what Larry brought to the garage and what Frankie brought to the Warehouse, as well as, of course, Ron Hardy, who I've not met, but there was that similar scenario, because back then there wasn't the amount of music that we have today. It's like you get 1,000 records a week over here in 2021, maybe more. Back then you had your staples. They were usually, for garage and that style, it was pre-disco, disco, post-disco era, but of the soulful kind. So it was usually like the Jocelyn Brown songs, the Chaka Khans, the labels like Prelude and West End, and, you know, I could mention so many, but I think you know what I mean. But the roots, as I might have mentioned earlier, to me, witnessing it was nothing short of like a foot-stomping church gospel kind of like vibe. Like these people really got down and just expressed themselves with their bodies, you know, like just freely, like almost like you think of like maybe a famous dance company like Alvin Ailey, the way people just express themselves. You would see that kind of stuff. People just gyrating and jumping, and not everybody, but a good amount of it had that energy. But within the context of each song brought out a different emotion. So today, how do we have crescendos? Usually with snare roll drum builds, you know, and or the effects on the mixer, Ableton, whatever people are bringing into the booth, we can create crescendos. But back then, the natural crescendo was within the song and written that way. And I guess, I don't know if I've said this before, but probably the most comprehensible way of referring to a song that people could understand what I'm saying to the nature of a natural crescendo. A great example is Love Sensation by Loleatta Holloway, written by Dan Hartman. And so the song is doing its thing, beautiful, you know, amazing singer. And towards the end, when it starts saying, and I won't take my love, and it goes away, and like, you would see everybody's hand in the air. Like that was the build.
Got
and
it.
A lot of records are like that. I can name many, many songs, even some corny disco records, but that was the nature of the composition, was to take you on that journey. Another part of this journey was the way DJs use the sound system. As you mentioned, like I did the other night, like I know when to pull back because I know the song and what it's about to do. So I'm not saying just me, a lot of DJs know, but I really do study the music, including the techno tracks I play. Like, okay, it's about to go boom on its own. Like it doesn't need me to touch any other knob right now. So the other half of it, which is completely unrelated to techno of today, of what I'm just describing to you from the Paradise Garage, and I'm certain the Warehouse in Chicago with these songs, was the participation in singing along. So you can, that's the part of what I was mentioning earlier about what I really learned the most from Larry, was to make the people feel what I'm feeling. Even if it's techno today, somehow it comes through, but nothing could shine through more than lowering the volume as the song is progressing. Even the one I just mentioned, Love Sensation, but a great example would be Keep On by D-Train. And he's kind of like testifying now. He's like, Keep On is, you know, motivational song. And then it gets into like this latter half where it's really about to break down. And he's saying, I can't let nobody keep me from reaching the top. Don't you give up on no one. So he's telling you, you know, to keep on reaching for your dreams. Reach, you're almost there. If you have a goal, set it. Larry used to slowly turn down the volume, and the whole room would sing it.
Wow.
You know, I'm getting goosebumps. Look at that.
Yeah.
You can't get that today, you know, and that's what's absent. And I probably described this in other interviews. I never really listened back because I sound weird. but that's how it was, and how could you not feel what he was feeling? Because he was playing the role of the artist and the singer through that song, because he was feeling it, and he was feeling the message, and he was sending those messages to the people through the speakers, and we all got it, week after week after week.
Wow.
And back then, you would go back anticipating hearing that song again. Now, every DJ plays something that no other DJ is pretty much playing, on the same bill. Back then, we could play the same song twice, just because it was that massive that 4 hours later, you bring it on again. It was just like the first time. You wanted to hear it twice. And in similar fashion, it goes for the live shows. So back then, we were known to have the artists come out and sing their hit songs, but the Paradise Garage was more unique because it would bring on those artists that had songs that were massive at the club. Many Larry may have remixed, Gwen Guthrie, and so on. And I've witnessed so many live performances there where it was, I can't even describe it, like the eruption, the sound of the crowd in the room. It's like I could close my eyes and just put myself there again and say, wow, this is why I'm still doing this at 60.
Wow.
Is like, I can't imagine doing anything else, even though we don't have that anymore. I'm not going to say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Jocelyn Brown singing, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. That ain't going to happen. And then the people showing love and appreciation with a hella stomping, some people bring a tambourine, it was like it was like going to church.
Wow.
Not that you were praising the DJ instead of God. There was God inside all of us, but this was just a different way of us worshiping in partnership and, an extension of, gospel truth.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's so deep, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a whole nother level that when you peel it back and we get the privilege of talking to someone like you, we really learn what this
just let
music
me
and
add that this
culture
is
all
not
about.
just, this is not just Paradise Garage and Warehouse. They definitely are staples, but it does go back to David Mancuso at the Loft, Nicky Ciano at the Gallery. These were the early years of playing funky-ish type soulful music that made you feel something, and then it developed into the word disco. But how could we deny the history of Studio 54 and what that did to the world?
Right.
Even though it wasn't garage-ish.
I understand what you're saying.
So
Jack, how are we doing on time and camera heat and everything? Good. All right, awesome. Okay, so one thing, I don't necessarily have a question, but it just seems like you have so much in your heart to say. But is there something you'd like to say about Larry Levan and what he was able to accomplish, and also just his influence on you?
Wait, I might need you to repeat that because my mind just went all over the place for a second.
Definitely. My question is, it's not necessarily a question, but you just said that you could talk for hours and that it brings up such strong emotions when you start talking about Larry Levan. What is it? What does his influence on you mean to you? Your influence in your style of DJing, but also just who you are as a person and your spirit.
All right, I'll try to make the best of that. Well, I never really got to know Larry super personally well. We did know each other, and of course I was in the main record pool that everybody else was in at that time, DJs on the scene. It was called For the Record, and it was because of being a member of that record pool, it gave me a privilege to go in the booth, which was a very large mezzanine kind of booth. So Larry was on one side, And then there was like a sofa, and you could overlook the crowd. So he knew we would wave. And then a couple of times we spoke, but didn't really get to know each other well. But the impact that he made on me and so many other people was that I don't think if it was for the Paradise Garage, I'd probably still be doing this the way I am, because it lit a flame inside of me that made it certain that I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Like, it made me realize what he's doing. I already knew that I wanted to do it before I even heard of him. You know, I was DJing at a young age, or wanting to. So I didn't hear about Larry till about 1978, 79. But I was already working in a club in 76. Right. So, but then that just elevated it to the highest of heights. And yeah, I think I made a joke the other night because I was talking with the driver that brought me to the venue, because he was very interested in the culture of it all, and he had listened to my interview with Tiga that very day, and we were talking about that. So he brought up Larry, and we're talking about the garage, and we're about to get out of the car and about to go in and play this techno set. I said, Larry, forgive me, you might be rolling in your grave tonight for what I'm about to do, but I think you'll be proud. So,
that's really funny, and thank you.
Because even though it was strong, mental techno, I still delivered it in a way that was the way I would deliver a deep house set.
Definitely, that's what that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Right,
it was really cool.
So,
thank you for sharing that. Let's jump ahead now. We kind of took that fork in the road at like Global Underground starting, but we didn't want to forget it. Like, we want to talk about the Paradise Garage. So I kind of want to talk about those Global Underground releases, because I read or I heard in an interview that you don't do a lot of mixed compilation albums, but when you do, you like to base them on a residency, or at least that's what I read about pertaining to the Global Underground mixes.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess there would be no denying that because of the residencies that I did hold, and because I was able to play the whole night or share with another DJ, but still had a long night of playing it, minimum of 8 hours. So I was able to tell a story, take people on a journey. And that's what a compilation is to me. Although it's within the context of 90 minutes on a CD, or maybe a double CD, but I still wanted to tell a story and not just start with a kick drum track and end with a kick drum out. So I always felt like, just like with shows and with compilations, there should be an introduction, get people's attention and emotion, and slowly build it up like you would a party in a nightclub at a residency. Have your peak tracks, and always end with something that makes sense to be the finale. So it's nothing short of theater. You get your introduction, you have your, what would you call it in a theater setting when you go to like a Broadway play? First act, second act, third act, and then you have your finale. Then the curtain goes down, you have your encore. So it's like going to an amazing restaurant, having an appetizer, an entree, dessert. It's like,
definitely,
it's dramatic. So yeah.
Did those two mixes for Global Underground, and I just don't know, did that play a big role in bringing the New York club sound to a global audience, or did the world kind of already know about what was coming out of New York at the time?
It's hard to say, because I don't think that if my mind digs deep into the selections that I chose for those 2 CDs, that it was very New York as far as the songs that I was playing. I think a lot of them were from different parts of Europe. A great part of it was. And I think maybe because when I think of New York house music, I think of Todd Terry or the more harder,
Right.
Tunnel era, hard drums, tribalish kind of New York techno. I mean, tribal house. But I don't think I ventured too much into that on my global CDs. And I do think that maybe some of the confusion also with the Global Underground and the residencies, yeah, they were relative to my residencies at Twilo and Tunnel, but it was also part of the touring. So the first one was Athens. It was based around my gigs in Greece.
Right.
But I was taking a break from my residency to go perform in Greece. So it kind of like, and then the second one was London. Didn't they do that with all the DJs, like different cities?
Yeah, they did. They brought
Yeah.
everyone to different cities. Some DJs, like, some DJs say the city has no effect on how I'm going to mix because I'm coming to showcase my sound. Like, that's,
Right.
Or other people say, I am making this mix in the spirit of this city. And like the city, the location actually really influences the type of mix. So it's just really interesting talking to different DJs and hearing how they approach the GU mix compilation because it's just cool. It's interesting. Everyone kind of took it their different ways.
Mine was just me displaying how music, I embraced it from different parts of the world and different styles. So here's a great example, opening up Global Underground Series 1 with Absolute Reason, which is extremely minimal. Like, that's like the birth of that genre, not that specific song, but that's 1996. That was a long time ago, and I know that it probably made a lot of people think, like, what is he playing? I'm sure a lot of people eventually loved it, but I think it wasn't what you'd expect from a New York DJ, that I'm going to, maybe start with something on Nervous or Strictly or those obvious things. And I went right for what I was embracing at the moment. And then it got into like, my tribalish guy. I always embraced percussion and rhythms. And I think ultimately what came out of my Global Underground series was people recognizing that I'm able to bring these different styles together, from deep house to tribal to minimal, progressive, and in a melodic kind of way, on the borderline of trance, but not trance, like fast and Goa, and managed to fuse it all in together carefully. I mean, when I listen to myself, I can't say that I hear a sound, but I get it when people say, that's a Tenaglia record, or that,
Yeah.
but I get it. And so, yeah, it's been an honor to do those series and be on the list of amazing DJs that have also been a part of it. It got me to play at Love Parade.
So cool.
In Berlin. And I'll never forget that. Yeah, I have. I'm so grateful.
Is there really a million people at Love Parade?
Probably. It did bring a lot of people to the city of Berlin. I don't know how they tolerated it after the first year, because when you have that many people invading a city, there's flyers and piss everywhere.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It's like, where are you going to pee? Where are you going to put that can of beer?
Right.
So it wouldn't be tolerated here.
I have like two more things I'd like to touch on. One is your Be Yourself party at Vinyl.
Yeah.
And the one thing I keep hearing about this is that Twilo and Tunnel were these big clubs and Vinyl was more of an intimate atmosphere. Can you go into a little bit of the atmosphere you were trying to create at your party?
Okay. Well, first of all, the history of vinyl was a famous avant-garde club in the 80s called Area. And it was kind of like a downtown Studio 54 kind of club, like way downtown in Tribeca, like maybe 5 miles apart. But they were big on decorations. They had like window displays, and they would change the windows. It was almost like walking down Fifth Avenue upon the entrance to the club and the dance floor. And again, it was like early club kids. It was a mixture of punk rock, goth, elite, the ropes outside and special theme parties, invitation only. But it really came into play for DJs like myself when Timmy Regisford and his partners took it over and called it The Shelter. That's when it became a mini garage, a mini sound factory, a mini Twilo. That's really what it was. It wasn't as large, but again, that was the concept. No liquor, 6 stacks you're surrounded by. It's, any club that's serious about the music should be just as serious about the sound. Because at the end of the day, if you're having a party and you stop the music, every single person is going to notice. And they do notice when the sound is great and when it's not so great. So that was really important to us. So Timmy developed The Shelter, and he was the main resident there for many years. And then it went on to become Vinyl, which was a nightclub while I was working at Twilo. And I remember the owner, Nick, always telling me, you got to come play for us, and I'm like, Nick, I work here, the politics, I can't. So when I stopped working at Twilo, I went down there and immediately I had a gig. Vinyl was NASA on Fridays, which is a total rave, breaks, drum and bass, kind of like a psychedelic kind of party. It was kind of fun. Sundays was Body and Soul, which was a spin-off of the Garage, Shelter, and, many other clubs I didn't mention that, Tony Humphreys in Zanzibar, that's the Garage of Jersey.
Right.
T. Scott at Better Days and Bruce Forrest. There was a lot of clubs that, emanated the garage vibe and music. And because back then we had options 7 nights a week to go out.
Wow.
It wasn't just, Saturdays at Garage or Twilo, Shelter. So when Nick asked me to play at Vinyl, they had stopped the NASA parties, and it became myself on Fridays, my guest, Body and Soul on Sundays, and Saturdays they started doing the global DJs, Danny Howells and Anthony Papa, the global underground movement, if you will. And it was perfect. There was no liquor. We could go until noon, and people that came there to dance and hear the music. And more than anywhere, that was my favorite residency because it was very consistent and a lot of hours each week, and I could break songs there like nowhere else, where, that was my version of the Paradise Garage, where I could play a song and have people participate in it and know that when they come back next week and you see those similar faces, that they're kind of waiting for several songs or songs like it. What's he going to play this week? That's new, kind of thing. But when you played those staple songs, there was magic in the air. And I don't think anybody really gets to do that anymore, because if you don't have the residency in the weekly, so many new songs come out, so many new tracks come out that it's like nobody's ever really going to play a similar set. And the people that are in attendance are pretty much going to be different too. So it's it's apples and oranges, you know, what we're living in today compared to those residency years. And to end off on that shelter situation in vinyl, vinyl in its last year or two became ARC, A-R-C. And my friend Mike Bindra partnered with Steve Dash, who was the guy from Phazon Sound System. So they brought in the Phazon Sound System, which was at Twilo, and the original Shelter Body and Soul sound system I bought.
Oh, nice.
It's in my basement. So I have that original system, those stacks, and partially from another sound system that's even more modern was Gary Stewart was like Steve Dash, and the guy that built the sound system at the Paradise Garage was Richard Long. So he deserves the credit for really, and Larry for coming up with that first massive stack situation. And then I bought that sound system as well, which was the prototype and the last of its kind that Pioneer bought the rights to. So if you went to Pioneer.com and went to Pro Audio and looked at their Club Nights sound system, that's the one I have in my basement combined with the Shelter Vinyl Body and Soul system. It's not a big basement, but, you know, I do have it set up. Destroy my brain further. And, yeah, there's so much history. I don't know, man. I can talk about everything. What else you got?
I think the last thing that I just want to learn about is the Winter Music Conference in Miami, because me personally, in some like weird twisted way, the Winter Music Conference is kind of why I've learned that I'm here interviewing you today, because it was my older cousin Ned Shepard who got me into DJing. Ned performs with this DJ Sultan. Ned's actually a New York City kid. Sultan had a new breed on Global Underground. Yeah. And so the story that they shared with me was that they actually, Sharam from Deep Dish actually met up with them at the Winter Music Conference. And that's where they shared the records with him. And and Sharam eventually signed him on the spot. And that started their whole journey. Flash forward 20 years, Ned gifted me his old Global Underground collection, which got me and Jack on this whole history of house music kind of journey we're on. So I wanted to ask you, how did you become the person that this conference kind of revolved around when people talk about your sets at the Winter Music Conference?
Well, I'm honored to hear you say that. I mean, I knew that what I was doing there was definitely influential, but it definitely was special. And I guess what I can tell you briefly, because it could be in depth, was that I moved to Miami in 1985. I stayed for 5 years. I became a resident at a nightclub called Cheers. I worked 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. And when the Winter Music Conference started in the year 1985, I missed that very first year. But in 1986, I participated, and our club, one of many, would host performances. So we would have artists like Taylor Dane, Niobe, Joyce Sims, people come and sing their hit songs, similar to what we talked about the garage. And then when the artist was done with their 2-3 songs, the DJ would go back on. The thing that got me recognized was that I was starting to become known in the industry because I became a reporter for Billboard Music Magazine. I was a DJ reporter that's giving my charts, not necessarily editorial. And because I was originally a New York person, some of the people I knew that were coming to Miami for the conference, all the delegates and record labels, Warner, Mercury, and they would give, the dance department budgets to go to Florida and participate in the Winter Music Conference, which was a legitimate conference where you'd register, get badges, go to the conference rooms, and hear the different topics and panels of discussion. But with me, It originally started at Cheers because I had an after-hour, our club had an after-hour license. Nobody else really did. So we could go to 7 a.m. So anything that had to close at 3, people came to us afterward. And it became a go-to party because, you know, it was starting to be talked about. And, you know, people were writing about it in Dance Music Report magazines. DJ Danny Tenaglia playing at Cheers after hours and mentioned the show. And then next year, and maybe England's writing about it now and other people. Then it developed into something more serious once it moved to Miami Beach, because I was in South Miami near the university at Cheers. Then I started playing at a club called Groove Jet, which is now called Treehouse. Once it made its way to Miami Beach, it was more centrally located to where all the hotels are and where most of the delegates were staying. But now that we were getting a lot of hype, my name and Tribal Records, Twisted Records that I was associated with, it started becoming like the place to go, not just for everybody, but whoever could fit in this small place, the industry clientele. So when I say that, I mean everybody that we can mention, from Deep Dish to Sasha Digweed, Carl Cox, Paul Okafor, Pete Tong. I mentioned a lot of British. I'm thinking of them right now. Farley and Heller, but Masters at Work, Mood to Swing, Todd Terry. It was almost like an extension of the conference being one of the panels where everybody was going. So let's say you wanted to go to that panel that's going to discuss the nature of EDM, you know, whatever it might be. There's so many radio promotions. Well, this became the talked about party to go to, Danny at Groove Jet, and you know you were going to have a good time and see a lot of the familiar faces. So it became like an industry standard. The second part of that was the marathons.
that's what I think I had heard, and they sounded insane.
It's almost impossible to stop me. Not saying that I disrespect. Like, they tell me it's time to stop, I stop.
Right.
But if there's no stop time, it's like I just won't stop. And it's crazy. I'm sure a lot of DJs feel that same exact way. I know for a fact many do. And but back then it really had a meaning, because I was bringing that Paradise Garage influence, the entertaining part of it, the songs, breaking songs that people are hearing for the first time, and sometimes not being shy to say, lower the music a little bit, say, this is Deep Dish's new track, and people would be like, you know, because for the industry people, you could see the look on their faces like, what is this? You know? So I felt obligated to just say, you know, this is Truce and Sabalos, hey, DJ Vibe. And yeah, so it became very successful for me. And then it moved on to space in the year 2000. So I had a good run there from 92, let's say. That's the year I can remember it, starting at Groove Jet, for a good 10 years. By then, the Ultra Fest started, and the whole slowly, but the progressive, the trance, the EDM, you know, everything changes. The industry started to change, and everything evolves. But I still live it in my, you know, my present gigs. I'm still that same guy. Like, that helped me, just like the garage and my upbringing with music, Motown, Philly, helped me to evolve to the DJ that I am today. Nut job.
Well, you know, I just want to thank you. Like, one thing that you said, and it doesn't have anything to do with house music, but in an interview you said, a good root makes good fruit. I think I heard you say that. And for me, this conversation and learning from you is all about learning about the roots of dance music, the roots of house music, so we can go out and appreciate it more,
Right.
and go with a new perspective. So just thank
My
you very
pleasure,
much.
William. Thank you so much, Jack.
Yeah,
this
was awesome. But
I'm
yeah.
nervous, by the way. You can't tell, maybe, but
No,
I still get butterflies before every gig and things like this, because it just brings up a lot of emotion for me. It's like there's still this flame inside of me, the same as when I was this little kid. Knew I loved music, wanted to play piano, wanted to play guitar. It was just like, what's inside the speaker? Where's these people? Where's the music coming from? Like, I was always so infatuated with instruments, and once I start talking about it, or once I get in a DJ booth, boom, it comes right back to me. It's like there's no age.
Well, I mean, I feel it. I feel the energy. It's awesome. Dude, so cool. You know, just a casual hour.
Don't fuck with me, fellas.
20 minutes. It turns into an hour.